To better understand the stakes, we've had our journalists, Editor-in-Chief Andre Salvail of the Aspen Daily News, and I've already introduced Josie Taras. They have been covering this issue extensively, and they have crafted a series of questions for tonight's town hall, also incorporating the questions submitted to us from community members as well. And now, without further ado, Andre, Josie, panelists, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Town Hall on the future of the Aspen-Pitkin County Pitkin County Airport, hosted by Aspen Public Radio and Aspen Daily News. I am Josie Taras.
And I'm Andre Salvail.
Pitkin County voters will face 2 ballot questions related to the future of the airport this November. To better understand the stakes, we're going to spend the next hour talking with our panel. So first, some background information. The airport is in the midst of updating its airport layout plan, also known as an ALP, with the Federal Aviation Administration. This document outlines design parameters for the airfield and is crucial in directing federal funding to the airport, and the airport is required to have an accepted ALP at all times. At the center of the local debate is what's called a modification of standard, which allows the airport to have a narrow separation between its runway and taxiway than the standard for other airports of Design Group 3. The FAA wants to see it widen from 320 feet to 400 feet, allowing the full wingspan of up to 118 feet access to the airport. Currently, the separation is only 320 feet. So our first question is for Jackie. Why does the FAA care about the separation mod at the Aspen Airport now, and what is the impetus on the county to remove it?
So thank you, Josie and Andre, for having me, and everyone else that's been involved here. I really appreciate being included in this. My understanding is that the FAA manages airports all over the country, and they have said, we want your airport to be a standard airport, a Group 3 standard airport, and you can do it. You have the ability, you have the space, and you are able to do this. So they have told us in no uncertain terms that this must happen, and we want you to do this for safety. The FAA is very focused on safety and accessibility, and having a wider runway gives basically shoulders to the runway, which allows for a little more width, and I think makes it obviously slightly safer. So the FAA has given us that mandate, and they have said, under no uncertain terms, will this be something we accept otherwise. We've tried to give them an airport layout plan that doesn't have this separation and the width requirement, and they have said absolutely not.
Amory, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that.
Yes, it's actually not an absolute mandate. They would, of course, prefer standardization. Bureaucracies do that. But they did make us an offer that they can keep their grants, we can keep our layout. It was a good offer, we ought to accept it. And it's not actually a safety issue because they calculated the 95-foot wingspan limit to be just as safe with the planes that fly here with the separation we have as the 400-foot full separation would be with the wider 118-foot wingspans. That's called equivalent safety. The county has been unable to identify any safety issue with the airport, and in fact, Rich said it's as safe as it can possibly be. Of course, if you tried to fit in planes it wasn't designed for, that would become unsafe, but there's no reason to do that because what we have has worked just fine for a quarter century, and there's no reason to change it to bring in planes that the airlines don't want.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question, again, is for Jackie Francis. Simply, what's the primary reason we are looking at these projects? Is it because we believe the CRJ 700s are going away as what was initially discussed when we started going down this road some 6 or 7 years ago? Or is it so that we don't lose out on the millions of dollars to fund the lion's share of airport improvements? Or is it both?
You know, I would kind of want to ask you, like, when you say these projects, I mean, is it
Runway widening and separation runway taxiway.
Okay, so I mean, it is because the FAA has said we have to do this, and I disagree with what Amory said. We have been told that we must do this, and in my opinion, I think that no matter what we decide as a community, I think the FAA will still make us widen the runway, even if they do it on their own. The airport layout plan from 2014 that was approved in 2016, I believe, my dates might be wrong, did have the airport runway being widened and shifted. So this is something that's already been approved by the FAA. So why are we doing it? We are doing it in order to prepare for the future, have a standardized Group 3 airport, work with the FAA, and that in turn gives us avenues to funding that can add to so many additional improvements we're looking to make at the airport, including climate improvements, environmental, local pollutants, electric infrastructure that we need for the future of electric aviation, if that's possible, in the next 10, 15 years, solar panels everywhere and anywhere we can put them. And we have so many things that are on our wish list as a community to put into this airport, and we really do need the funding that we can get on the federal level through an airport layout plan, and that is something that I feel, as a non-growth person, is incredibly important to say that this isn't about the growth. This is about making just a much better airport.
So real quick, Jackie, if you don't mind my following up with a quick question. The whole argument, the whole impetus behind this originally, and I was covering it at the time, was about the phase out of the CRJ 700s. Would you say that the conversation has shifted?
You know, likely, because United did come forward with bringing in, I think, 19 of the Embraer 175s and making that change. You know, we don't have even the opportunity to bring in the Airbus 220, which is a quieter, less polluting plane. But the Embraer is something that United has chosen now, and so that has come into the mix. The CRJ 700, you know, may or may not still fly in the next, 10, 20 years, but that's speculation, and it's speculation as to whether or not the airlines are going to go with that. Right now, they're making a decision to go with the Embraer because it does fit within the runway as we have it, and they have to make a business decision based on the situation on the ground.
Amory, rebuttal?
Two different things can be true at the same time, and that's what's happening here on whether the FAA is mandating the changes Jackie describes. When I asked the FAA's John Bauer in front of the commissioners last year, if we stop asking for bigger planes and expecting more discretionary grants, can we keep the layout we've got, the wingspan limit, the modification of standards? One time he said yes, the other time he said yes, absolutely. He emphasized, of course, that we would lose the grants, but now we've done a financial study that just withstood the county's fifth effort to demolish it, showing that you don't need the grants because the county's about to ink $1 billion deal on the FBO, and that's more than you need to finance everything we need. The reason Jackie says it's an absolute mandate is that when Peacock went to Washington with two commissioners, he just asked, what do you want? He left out the if part. Ask a different question, get a different answer. The commissioners didn't notice the switch. I hope, Jackie, that you have noticed it because it's very important. And of course, everybody wants all the great stuff you described, but we can have it with the FBO income. Let's use this windfall to solve all the problems you describe.
Jackie, the airport has received $116.5 million in federal grant funding since 1982, according to the FAA. What legal obligations come with that money, and where does the county stand with the FAA in terms of those grants today?
From my understanding, this is uncharted territory, and we don't know what the FAA would do with that. This is my understanding and what we've been told. They've said to us that the FAA could ask for that money back. We really don't know. We've also been told that the FAA has never been in this situation where a community has chosen such a reckless and kind of risky route to not go with an airport layout plan, which is, obviously, it's in my opinion kind of like a building, trying to say we're going to build without like any kind of certification, and we don't need a CO. We're going to do this without that. So I think the FAA. I think Amory's kind of cherry picking some information about what John Bauer said. I think he was put on the spot at that time, and we actually have had a letter from the FAA saying that they absolutely will not accept anything but an airport layout plan that includes the separation and the widening. And they have written that to us in, a letter, which is something that the FAA also doesn't usually do, is just like say this is something we expect from your community, and we are committing to that. So we have that kind of information from the FAA, and I think it's very, very important that we understand that the FAA has been clear with us on this.
Amory, you've argued that the airport doesn't need this amount of federal funding. How could the airport sustain itself without that money, and why would it want to?
Well, may I rebut the previous remark, though?
Well, there's no built-in rebuttal here, but yes, you can, and then answer the other
I'll be
question.
quick. The FAA has explicitly dismissed the grant clawback idea in front of the commissioners, along with the airport downgrade idea. And the notion that this is reckless or risky has to be tempered by some other bits of information. The FAA has not followed its own rules or the procedures required by federal law. The commission's conclusions and process, I think, are infirm. And it is true that you could interpret what the FAA wrote as an attempt to renege on the offer twice made the previous year, although it's not exactly the same. On the other hand, the FAA is legally obliged to respect local laws and regulations, and in a few weeks we'll get to find out what the sentiments of the populace are, and they will have to respect that.
Quick fact check on that. At the April 2023 meeting with John Bauer, the local FAA representative who came to talk to the Pitkin County Commissioners and the Airport Advisory Board, he said, if you're talking local constraints about access restrictions or things that locals say we don't want in this community, we really don't consider them in our, again, back to what I said with standards, safety, access. Those are the things we frame around everything we do. Amory, I have a question for you.
Yes.
In John Bauer's words, who is the FAA representative for our district, the administration is already, quote, gun shy to work with Aspen after they pulled out of the last ALP process last minute. How do you suggest the airport and county repair that relationship?
Our suggestion to the BOCC, which they have never considered, just as they have never considered alternatives without big planes, was laid out in a letter April 8th, to which I got no response. And it simply says, let's accept John Bauer's offer. It's a good and fair offer. And assure them that we stand ready to rebuild the runway and start on the terminal, all at our own expense, as soon as you allow us to. Here is a new ALP, and if necessary, we will happily submit an evidence-based forecast, not the bogus one you coerced us into providing with 3 times the historically based growth. And that old one didn't actually require bigger planes. Actually, you didn't follow your own rules either, which would have resolved that forecasting conflict at headquarters based on the evidence. There are a number of other respects in which the forecast ignored their own rules. So we suggested basically that we put the burden on the FAA to say, do you really want to handicap our airport to enforce a bureaucratic standardization in which you have complete discretion? After all, we have 85 modifications of standard. This is just one. Many of them can never get fixed, and you have to use discretion on each one, particularly if the county loses the vote. Anyway, you have to follow what the people said, and if there's any delay in approval to do what we are offering to do and pay for so you can keep your grants, that's on you. I think this could be done in a sensible way if cooler heads prevail and we get accurate information, which the commissioners have not gotten so far.
Jackie?
So Amory says, I think this could be done in a sensible way. And I actually I'm a very pragmatic big systems thinker. And, I've put about 20 years into this, been to over 200 meetings, heard so many experts speak on this, and I don't see why we're beating up our community and why we're battered, bruised, and going to be broke when we have a solution that actually has so many good things in it. The airport layout plan is it's chock full of tons of really good things for our community. A net zero airport, solar panels, electric infrastructure, all kinds of really good things. And all we have to do is widen the runway. And I just don't understand why that has to be such a tear the community apart idea, because it's really, in my very expert opinion, not gonna ruin our community by just having the runway be slightly wider. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. This next question is for Mayor Tory. Tory, you recall the ASE vision process that occurred in 2019 and 20. I think you might have been on one of those committees. They brought in over 100 community members to contribute to explicit airport goals, but there was some public criticism alleging that the process the county embarked on was not done fairly. And a lot of people dropped off the map of those committees, and that left out many important voices. Do you think there was credibility to those criticisms? And does hindsight offer any reflections on how future processes might be undertaken for infrastructure conversations?
Thank you, Andre. Thank you guys all for being here. I was introduced as a member of the OAOV, our airport, our vote group, but I want to let you know that I am also a third-term mayor for the city of Aspen right now, but I'm here representing myself and not the members of my council that I serve with. First of all, I'd like to make a land acknowledgement for those that were stewards of this land before us, most notably the Ute Native American tribes. We should honor them and this land and each other through stewardship. Secondly, I want to thank the Wheeler Opera House. This is a place of community gathering for civic dialogue and the hope of understanding and collaboration. I participated in the airport visioning groups at the beginning of the process. I and another seated Aspen City Councilman were there. We were not assigned to any issue committee. We were in the large body non-focus group. Even now, the city of Aspen is offered only a non-voting membership on the Airport Advisory Committee that Jackie chairs, and that seat can only be filled by someone who is not one of our elected officials. That's the current state of the Visioning Committee. My initial intention was to support our county commissioners in their desire to present a community-based, sustainable airport plan to the FAA. As I am told, the defined common ground goals that came out of that Visioning Committee were modified by the FAA and sent back with a demand for a runway change for any FAA funding participation. Now what I see is the voters of Pitkin County are being intimidated into giving up their rights about voting in a referendum and providing input to both the commissioners and the FAA. This is not right. A ballot question that seeks to suppress voters' rights is contrary to the Pitkin County Charter and unconstitutional. We can have a new airport in collaboration with the FAA for funding without allowing the next larger class of planes.
Thank you, Tory. If I could revisit the question, though, do you think that the ASE vision process was a fair process?
Well, like I said, what we've heard in the public, we don't know really how things are going down. I will tell you that I was in the room and I was on the visioning committee and participating when the consultant team that was brought in for that was taken off of that. My understanding was that perhaps the results weren't being garnered that were being looked for, and so the county took in another process there. that led me to questions. That's all I can say. Do I know what happened after that and why there was a choice to change direction with the visioning committee and then have what came out of the visioning committee challenged and rebuffed by the FAA? That I don't know.
I'm going to open up the rebuttal to that to either Jackie or Michael or both.
I'd like to say something.
Jackie?
Okay, so I was the one of the 3 people in charge of the visioning committee during this whole process, and I want to add that nobody on the visioning committee actually stepped off, which was the main 21 group that actually met many times and went over all of the other groups' report outs. So nobody on that group dropped out. And I want to say too that it was John Bennett, Meg, and I that asked the consultants to step away because we wanted to have this be a community-led effort. And I just want to say that I'm a 54-year Aspen local, and I lived across from the airport. I've been involved because I care so much about this community and because I am an Aspen local. So I just wanted to let you know that the visioning process was fan-friggin-tastic. It was an unbelievable process. I went to so many of the other meetings, and somebody told me today that Tori only went to 2 meetings, and I don't know if that's true or not. But I do want to say that I went to so many of these meetings, and it was an absolutely stellar process with so many people involved, and I really want to thank everybody who did engage in that process.
Tori, I think you wanted
sorry.
to.
May I at some point?
Okay, go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So I was part of the visioning process too. I sat on the community character working group. I know we had one person leave due to a conflict of interest, but there was very little attrition beyond that. This was a process, and this was a decision that was intended and is by home rule charter made at the county commissioner table. This process of making a decision at the county commissioner table was more informed by the public than any decision made at a city council table or a county commissioner table ever. It was 16 months of 100 people rolling up their sleeves, working really hard to put forth a recommendation that I think is excellent. The FAA said some of the things you're asking for you can't do, but it's a not inconsequential list of things, but it's a short list. So to call into question the integrity of the process, I believe, is outrageous.
Amory, real quick.
Yeah. 2/5 of the people in that process quit, many feeling hurted. I have immense respect for those who stuck it out and all the hard work and good thought they put into it, so I'm not criticizing them. But opinions differ widely on whether it was a fair and open process or designed to reach a particular conclusion. In the end, the work product that was approved after subsequent vote changes, 16-5 by that handpicked visioning committee, was approved in part by a third of the original participants and by a tenth, approved in part by a third and approved in whole by a tenth of the original participants. I don't view that as a resounding consensus, and if there were one, we wouldn't be having these arguments now.
Okay,
It was
thank you.
20-1 in that vote, by the way.
I'm sorry?
We're going to move on.
I didn't hear you.
Josie?
Thank you. Amory, there's been a lot of hullabaloo over the impending potential future arrival of quote-unquote bigger airplanes. Why do you see the G650 and other similarly sized aircraft as a threat?
I haven't actually said much about the 650. Rather, I'm particularly concerned with the risk that once you open up to big planes, you end up having to accept anything that can fit. And that includes 737s, A319s, A320s. There are many hundreds of them in private ownership. Many of those owners would love to come here. They can't now because the plane's too big. Notice that the private versions are generally a lot lighter weight than the commercial versions and therefore less restricted than what the airlines would fly. I'm not particularly concerned about the airlines bringing in those planes, but having old, dirty, noisy planes come in that we could not stop, I think is a considerable risk. And it's worth noting that of the common ground recommendations on environment. There are basically 3 on emissions and noise and 3 on airplanes and growth. The county's plan flunks all 6 and yet is consistently claimed to meet all 6. That is simply not true. Nobody can tell me where that untruth came from, but they just keep saying it, and we have analyzed very clearly that it's not true. You're saying a minute remaining, but I thought I was asked for a very short response.
That was the question before. You
Oh,
can
I'm sorry.
complete your thought on this one.
Say again?
Complete your thought on answer on this one, please.
On the,
On the G650 and larger planes. Yeah,
Yeah.
please keep going.
yeah. It's also worth noting that the private planes are projected by the county to grow about twice as fast as the airline planes. We are projected by the county, FAA approved, to have 31% more airline passengers and an unknown and unknowable number of additional private passengers because nobody counts those. And it is also, I think, of concern that the air taxi category is expected to end up about twice as big as the number of airline planes, but air taxis can legally be up to 60 seats. Bill Tomsich doesn't think there's a good business case for them, but business conditions often change among other things, and I don't think it's at all reassuring to know that in principle we could have several times more people if those air taxis were filled up.
Thank you. Jackie, what are the benefits and drawbacks of wider wingspan aircraft?
Sorry, may I rebut that? And are you guys keeping track at all of speaking time among us?
You
here?
have a lot of questions in the later half.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
We'll get to you, Michael. But if
But
you'd
may I
like
rebut
to
that specific one that he just gave?
if you'd like to interject now, please.
Yeah,
You have a
because
minute.
that air taxi speculation is just outrageous. Again, that is wild speculation. If there was a business model for that, it would exist in great numbers now because there are planes with narrow enough wingspans. The CRJ 700, the retired versions of them, are one of them that you could convert to an air taxi. There's a reason it's not happening. And the private aircraft projection is also off base.
Jackie?
Yeah,
Wider
I'm going to talk a
wingspans.
little bit to, speculation and what we could see happening. And I don't think we can say exactly what's going to happen. I mean, I did look into the older 737s, and there are almost none of them in the private fleet anymore. They're grounded. They're not flying. I think if we actually decide to do a whole community effort about changing the airport layout plan just for the very, very, very few and the very small possibility that an older 737 will come in here, I think that's ludicrous, and I think it's very risky, and I think it's also irresponsible for us. So I think the new planes that could come in with wider wingspans are mostly going to be quieter, and they will also be less polluting. So that's something that seems like a very positive effect for our community. Also, in the future, if there's hybrid electric, we're going to need electric infrastructure. That's something we need to do with this kind of FAA money. And I think the future of lighter aviation will have wider wingspans.
Tori, it looked like you had something to say there.
Yeah, let's see. There's been a lot that's already been said here today. And again, I am here mostly to represent our right to vote on this as an issue. That's primarily what I'm here to say, is that we deserve as a community to be in charge of our future. Now, I think on your last question, when we talk about the wider wingspans and what those impacts are going to be, well, most of the community that I talk to is struggling with the affordability and livability of our valley. Most of the community that I talk to is struggling with the traffic and the congestion, housing issues, shortages, workforce shortages. What I know is that larger airplanes don't make any of those issues any better, and they possibly can make them worse. The last thing I'd like to say about this is that, my recollection is coming out of the visioning committee meetings, there was nobody, no, wait a minute, not nobody. there are people in our community that are looking for more tourism, more larger planes, more visitation, more business, and more money. There are people there. But I don't remember anybody coming out of the visioning committee going, you know what we need is bigger planes. This came back to us from the FAA. This was not the community's intention through the visioning committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. We're going to move on from that series of questions and talk a little bit about the arrival of the E-175. I believe one of the airlines will be is said to be flying that aircraft into Aspen maybe this winter. And that is an aircraft that does fit the current parameters of the wingspan limitation currently in place. So this goes to each of you. If you could give me 30 seconds, I'm going to start with Michael and go right to left, I guess. Do you have any thoughts on the E-175 coming to town and serving as a replacement for CRJ 700 aircraft?
So it's a viable replacement that is newer, which is positive. It is no cleaner or quieter. It has the same number of passengers. So in terms of emissions goals, it does not move the needle positively, but it's a viable replacement for the CRJ 700, and it's proof that that plane was ready to retire.
Okay. Tori, do you have any thoughts on that aircraft?
Again, I'm here to mostly represent that we have a right as a community to vote on this as an issue and that our voter rights should not be suppressed. But yes, I do. I think it's a myth buster, right? The E-175 came in. We were told for years that Aspen's going to lose commercial service because airlines are retiring 95-foot wingspan planes. Not true. Our primary characters are switching to that. I want to make another point about this. Some of the ads that are being run by folks in favor of an airport talk about larger aircraft being able to offer direct nonstop flights, which would be better than a connecting flight. But the problem is they're not replacing any of the connecting flights. These will be additional flights. United has a hub in Denver. People that fly from Miami to Denver aren't all coming to Aspen. So these will be additional flights. This is not going to be flight replacement.
Jackie?
So we're moving into, the commercial space. We're talking about the commercial airline now with the E-175. And one of the things we did in the airport layout plan in the visioning process is we actually restricted gates. And the point of that was so that we wouldn't have what Tori's talking about, is more flights coming in and more people rushing into Aspen. It was like there'll only be a certain number of flights that can come in because they have to have a gate to land. So we have kind of some artificial restriction that we put into that plan. And the E-175 it's a sidestep. I'm really concerned with local pollutants and climate pollutants, and this is not an improvement. And the noise factor is also not an improvement.
Amory?
There is no speculation in the numbers I'm giving you. They are based on the county's own forecasts, not mine. On the gate restrictions, yes, any three commissioners can reverse those any time. It's a little hard to believe that we would turn away traffic that wants to come here and the business community wants them. On wider wingspans, it was true until about 4 years ago that was the classic solution for making planes cleaner and more efficient. It has stopped being true 4 years ago with flight testing of some excellent super efficient and electric new aircraft. I have been offering Jackie for 2 years to brief that extraordinary progress to the Airport Advisory Board, but she hasn't scheduled a hearing and therefore doesn't know about it. Thank you.
Sorry, just a question for the moderators. I think I was the only person who answered that question that you asked.
Thank you, Michael.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Should I keep doing that, or can I go off the range myself? Because I'd love to respond to the other things that were said.
Well, we're trying not to be too rigid, but we do want to follow the questions.
I do agree with what Michael said on that.
You know, I mean,
Yeah, sorry, because Tori went into sort of how airlines schedule their flights and that there are going to be additional flights. It's like the governor for tourist capacity in this community is bed-based. This is well understood. Amory has dug in enough to say that there's a 98% correlation. So the big planes flying direct from somewhere else, they have to be replaced because the capacity is not there for people to show up.
Okay,
So,
thank you, Michael.
okay.
We're going to move on. Amory, Aspen Flyride concluded that the county can pay for its own runway repairs with FBO revenue. A first look at that contract estimates an $879 million payout over the next 30 years. Just for clarity, that contract has yet to be signed. Critics have said that your conclusion is vulnerable to changes in operation at the airport, for example, of runway sterilization or FAA downgrades or any sort of restriction on operational parameters. How would you suggest safeguarding against those vulnerabilities if you agree they in fact are vulnerabilities?
Well, as I said, depending on what the voters do, the FAA may have to change its tune. There are other legal and political reasons it may have to, as it did in letting us keep the nighttime curfew that they wanted to cancel. You remember that in '95 when they suspended grants and then restored them. I think the approach I described, accepting the offer they made us, is a good one, and putting the onus on them if they want to go against their own access goals. For example, downgrading the airport would cut business flights by a third. It would lose 13 times more flights than they hope to gain on specific designated types of aircraft by the expansion that they want to do. So it would go in the opposite direction to their own policies. But the critique of our work that you cite assumed 38% less airport revenue than the county's own projection. It assumed bond designs and conditions 3 times less favorable than the county applies to its own airport revenue bond, planned for airport modernization based on the same revenue at the same airport. The only difference is that their bonds would include bringing in bigger planes. Ours would not, and of course that's an outcome different than what the county wants. I think it's pretty remarkable that they apply threefold different criteria in bond design and ignore all of our financial advisors' recommendations, which we published and recommended for reducing investor risk and using the same investment grade bonds that the county adopts in its bonds for the same airport.
And some added context there, the county contracted with the national consulting firm Piper & Sandler, who concluded that the airport, the FBO contract of $879 million has a approximate $120 million bonding capability. Michael, do you have any follow-up?
No, I mean, I think that we like Amory, I think, has said that his analysis is superior and to the analysis that the county has commissioned. And that is a recurring theme, which is that the county commissioners are wrong. And sometimes the implication is somehow corrupt, that the county staff is the same, that the financial analysis is also wrong. Everybody on the county side of this, I'm sorry, but they can't be wrong.
Can I
Jackie,
just quickly, I want to also add that the curfew issue was changed by it was put in place by an act of Congress, and John Bauer himself said to us, you know, if you want to have local control over wingspans, then you need to go to Congress and work with them on a standard of local communities having this kind of control. And that was the advice John Bauer gave us, and I've suggested that to Aspen Flyride and others, that if we want to have this kind of like route, that is the way I think would be best.
Amory, we received several questions from the community on this particular line of thought. And the question is, why should the community take more stock in Aspen Flyright's findings than the FAA, the aviation consultants, the national consultants, and the county?
The county has been pursuing this agenda for a dozen years, and of course gets to choose its consultants. The consultants know what answer is desired. The consultants desire county business. I've been a consultant for about 50 or 60 years, and there's an old adage, whose bread I eat, his song I sing. That's not the way I do consulting, but I'm not sure everybody else does it the same way. And what we do at Aspen Flyride is carefully document all of our findings. There's about a 300-odd page book of them, to which the county has never given a response. We have put thousands of hours of careful research into this based on the county's own documents, and we reach different conclusions by rigorous logic. I would like to say that I could say the same for the 5 attempts the county has made, several through consultants, to rebut us, but I'm afraid I can't. It's very shoddy work. And the way that's done is very simple. The county commissions a consultant to do a hit job on a product of ours. The county then generally conceals the existence of that product and tells its story first internally in closed session to the commissioners and then to the public. And of course, often the commission process allows a 3-minute public comment or none. We publish a rebuttal, which is then typically ignored but sometimes criticized. But we stand our ground because we are doing correct analysis carefully and documented. Arithmetic is not an opinion. Our analysis stands, and I'm sorry that a lot of capable people in the county have been misled about it or don't agree with it, but I think if they got accurate information, they would, and I wish they would talk to us about it.
Jackie, did you have a comment?
Just really, really quick. I think that that's a false narrative. I think that that is an opinion, and I don't think it's a correct opinion. And I think that we have done a lot of work with a lot of different organizations, and I find that to be, insulting for the work we've done, the work the AAB has done, and also the work that the county commissioners and all the experts have done.
Jackie, this question is for you. The FAA says you cannot discriminate against the number of planes using the airport, commercial or private, nor the aircraft type, so long as they fit within the guidelines for an Airport Design Group 3 facility. So there are a lot of goals in the Common Ground recommendations. I believe most of them, many of them are aspirational. I'm referring to passenger growth and greenhouse gas emissions. And a lot has been made of those goals and how they fit within the community standards. But how do you really keep those in check when the FAA says, any airplane within that wingspan or whatever can land at ASE?
I mean, mostly the foundational goals that we set with the whole process and with the AAB have been around safety, around noise and emission reductions, and those things we're already really working on. And I think we've already spoken to the safety issue, and there is, I think, common sense in having a wider runway actually helps some of the safety issue. We've had most of the accidents that we've had have been in the private planes being blown off the runway, or I think it's called a excursion on the runway or something like that. So a wider runway could be helpful there. The FAA has said that they, want that to be our standard. And then as far as the emissions and noise, we're already moving forward and have approved measurement and monitoring stations, and we're working on baseline emission reports and local emission reports. So we're trying to put all these goals in place right now with the funding that we have and move forward in what the Visioning Committee has laid out as the 15 recommendations and all the sub-recommendations. There's definitely a lot of things that the Vision Committee has recommended that the Airport Advisory Board is already putting in place.
However,
May I-
I'm going to follow. I have a follow-up question for Jackie, and I understand that, Jackie, but there's no teeth in enforcement in any of this.
You know, that's probably correct as far as, you know, we are trying to do our best as far as the Airport Advisory Board. And the teeth, I mean, no, we're not going to be able to say, oh, yeah, we didn't meet these standards. But I think that, you know, it is something that if you have a goal and you have a baseline and you start working on it, it is obviously something that we're going to be self-monitoring as a community.
May I make
Amory?
an important one-word correction? You said the FAA says we can't discriminate. What they actually say is you cannot unjustly discriminate. There are many ways you can influence who flies what here. One of the most interesting of our dozen essays the county hasn't responded to is about a whole bunch of very promising policy instruments and fiscal instruments the county could use that do not violate that FAA stricture, and indeed some of them are pre-approved by the FAA, and yet they have never been explored, let alone applied. So we do actually have some potential, but I agree with Jackie and with the import of your question that once we open the airport to the bigger wingspans, we have to let them all in. There is no possible enforcement mechanism for local environmental standards or goals about noise or emissions, and that's why it's particularly concerning that even without counting bigger, dirty old commercial planes, the county's plan would already increase air pollution by 25% and later 40%.
Michael?
Yeah, the only way to get the cleaner aircraft of the future is to embrace the future. And Amory will say, and I'm sure that he's correct, that there are advances in technology that have come along that mean that efficiencies aren't exclusively tied to wider wingspans, but a lot of them are. And the lack of drag that he'll refer to is important and is meaningful, but to get more efficient planes, and they exist, right? We've talked about this A220-100 that is substantially cleaner. I have a letter that I hope to get to allude to at some point from the mayor of Newport Beach, California, thanking Delta Airlines profusely for bringing that plane into their market. Embracing future technologies and better existing technologies, widening the runway and taxiway will allow us to do that faster.
I have another question for you, so you can talk about that letter here in this response. This is another question that showed up pretty heavily in our community questions that we solicited. It's going to take a lot of greenhouse gas and carbon emissions during the construction and remodel of both the airfield and the terminal in that construction work. Is that embedded carbon worth it?
Yes, because you have to rebuild the airport regardless. As a reminder, the airport has not had any meaningful upgrades in 40 years. So if our community philosophy is, hey, let's just let it keep degrading until it falls down potentially, that's not a good tactic. I think everyone agrees that we need a new terminal. Everyone agrees that we need a new runway. So that's really a question that I think all of us would probably say, you know, you've got to do it. So you want to do it in the best and lowest impact way that you can. But really, it's a kind of a non-question.
Tori?
Thanks. I've been trying to maybe get in on a couple of these different questions for a little bit, so I'm going to package them all together real quickly. A few questions ago, you asked Amory, why should people trust his math and not some of the data that's coming out of the county? That's an issue of trust. Again, as I started off saying before, we were told for years that we were going to lose commercial service because they were retiring 95-foot wingspans. Not true. We were told then recently that the FAA would downgrade the Pitkin County Airport to not allow commercial service. Not true. And that's even been confirmed by Dan Bartholomew, the airport director. We were told just recently this year that the FAA was going to make Pitkin County build a 100-foot control tower, air traffic control tower, and place it across Highway 82. That's not true. So
It could happen.
So while we're talking about this trust issue and why people should listen is because trust has been eroded, and now we're facing a county posed question that it seeks to undermine a citizen referendum ballot initiative and puts on a ballot question that seeks complete authority, which they kind of already had. And so, it's been an erosion of trust. Last thing I'll say here is that all the environmental upgrades that are going to happen at this airport are on the ground side. The air fleet changeover or larger, more fuel efficient planes is a small part of what we can achieve out there. We don't need the bigger planes in order to achieve our environmental goals.
Can I quickly say something about
You have 30
trust?
seconds, Jackie.
Why Tori would like the community trust Amory more than me? I mean, why? I've been here 53 years. I've been working on this a lot longer than he has. And let me say, I would have loved it if you and/or Amory might have been on this visioning committee, because maybe we'd be a lot further along in this conversation.
I wish I was allowed. I wish the county would have allowed me to be, because I requested it and I was told I could not be. But
And
here's
I'm
the deal,
sorry
Jackie.
that that's not what happened.
But that is what happened. But here's the deal, Jackie. I don't not trust you. I don't necessarily trust some of the information that's come out. And it's not condemning of everybody and everything, but there's been a track record of things that have been proven not to be true. I trust you a ton, but you're not doing the math on these things. Amory does run the numbers himself. He is working these data points. It's not about trusting you or not. I have a ton of respect for you. I do. So don't even try to paint that picture. But the information that you might be getting might not be as accurate as we all want it to be. Again, I'm here to support voting on this as an issue.
Thank you, Tori. We're going to move on.
Okay. We're going to move on to talking about the election now. There are 2 ballot measures for Pitkin County voters related to the airport, both aiming to amend the county home rule charter. Question 200 is put forth by Our Airport, Our Vote, the issues committee affiliated with Citizens Against Bigger Planes. It asks voters whether or not to remove the county's authority to make decisions altering the runway from its January 1st, 2024 state without voter approval. Question 1C is put forth by the county, seeking to, quote, reaffirm the commissioner's authority to approve and implement a runway layout.
If both issues pass, the county says that issue 1C takes precedent and will supersede the other. It appears that both groups are already gearing up for a legal fight should that happen.
So, Michael, we're going to start with you. What consequences do you see if the opposing ballot question prevails?
So you mean if just 200 passes and
Yes.
1C does not?
Yes.
That puts us back years. That means that we do not have an airport layout plan. And essentially what I've been thinking is that you would, if given, the citizens were given the right to decide, they would very likely do the same thing that just happened, which is pull a group of citizens together who can commit time to learning about the issue, bring in experts to learn about the issue, find out what the FAA, try as hard as you can to achieve the best thing that you can, give it to see what the FAA says about it, negotiate with them. That all just happened. So essentially, for me, 200 is like the equivalent of a Stop the Steal campaign, which is a process unfolded. You voiced your concerns about what was going on. Despite what's being said, those concerns were thoroughly interrogated at the commissioner table. And I know, Amory, you may say that your analysis wasn't given due airing, but I attended a lot of the meetings, and I watched the commissioners go concern by concern and represent the people very effectively at that commissioner table. And then you lose that representative democracy battle, so you say, okay, we want a do-over on different terms, so we're going to go direct democracy. But the thing is that you'll very likely end up in the same place just 3-4 years later with a lot less federal money at your disposal because the big grant funding opportunities are expiring.
Tori?
Thanks. I think that's Michael's last statement there is fantastic because it really encapsulates what's going on here. We're chasing the money. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if this Inflation Reduction Act funding wasn't available. But we're chasing the money. We want to get it, and we want to get it done now, so we'll do whatever it takes to get it done. You know, we had some analysis done of what you suggested, Andre, which was that with conflicting ballot measures that the county was claiming that 1C would take precedence. You know, as I see it, the Pickens County Charter actually seeks to resolve this. If conflicting resolutions are approved at the same election, the one receiving the greatest number of affirmative votes shall prevail to the extent of such conflict. So I actually think that the Pickens County Charter itself says that the larger number of votes would prevail in that situation.
It does. I have had this discussion with Ryan Neely, interim county attorney. The way that the county ballot question 1C is worded, the notwithstanding it specifically, which comes at the beginning of the text, is what would supersede it. That is my understanding.
Does anyone else have a comment on this line of thought, this questioning?
I just hope our community doesn't get to a place where we're doing some kind of crazy litigation and all these legal challenges. I really hope we can come together on this in a way where we feel empowered and we feel good about where we're moving forward. That's what I hope.
Amory?
Aspen Fluoride, being a 501c3, does nothing about ballots and electoral matters. That's not our space. However, when I used to study constitutional law at Harvard, it was pretty clear that a local government body does not have authority to amend, for example, the state constitution, which expressly reserves to the people the rights of initiative and referendum. Therefore, the county never had untrammeled authority. The people could always overrule them by the petition process provided, and that is what's now underway, on which I can't comment further. Tori?
Tori, you can answer that, and then I have a question for you.
Just seconds on this. You know, the intention of the ballot questions is not to take power away from the county commissioners. The intention of the ballot questions is to support the county commissioners. What we have heard from the county commissioners is that they went to the FAA, they explained our situation, they made their ask, and they were rebuffed and turned away by the FAA, saying you will accept larger planes if you want any of our funding. We, as a citizens group, are trying to support the county commissioners being able to work with the FAA. We do not object to terminal improvements and rebuild, and we do not object to runway improvements and rebuild.
Michael, quick comment?
Yeah, so the FAA has never said you will accept bigger planes. No one is asking for bigger planes. The FAA wants to do the runway taxiway separation and the runway widening for safety reasons. And we could end up in a future after we do this where maybe we don't need so many wider wingspan planes. If the technological future that Amory describes arrives, that will just make the airport that much safer. A wider runway is safer. There's a letter from 40 pilots in the paper yesterday or today saying this is why to do it. The FAA has said over and over again that this is about safety. They could not be clearer about this. Framing it as bigger planes are being shoved down our throats is an inaccurate representation of the FAA stance and the community's motivations for doing it.
Wait, can I ask a quick
Yeah,
question?
quick rebut.
I just want to ask the question of, when John Powers said, if you guys want to change this, why don't you get a citizens group and go to Congress? Why isn't that something that the citizens group is doing? Why isn't that something that you're going to Congress rather than creating this fight in the community?
We could collaborate on that, I think, if it gets to it. It's a good idea you had. It is what we did on the curfew. On the other hand, we do have very specific questions in front of us here. There are specific mechanisms for dealing with them, and citizens other than our group, we are not connected, we are not coordinated, are using those mechanisms provided by our Constitution.
Thank you, Amory. Tori, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to say, hey, we can widen the runway, we can move the taxiway, and you don't have to allow the larger planes. So you're suggesting that It's not about bigger planes, but it has become about bigger planes. I'm all for it. Let's move the runway. You don't have to move it 80 feet. And by the way, moving the runway 80 feet closer to Shale Bluffs, I don't know if that's a measure for safety. I don't believe so. And wait a minute. And Michael, you just referred to an ad that was placed, maybe by your group in today or yesterday's paper, that cited, I believe, 30 some odd local airline pilots. Unfortunately, out of that group of 30 something airline pilots, 60% of them are not local. They do not vote in Pitkin County. They are not registered here. So it was touted in the paper as local pilots giving their input, but I'm sorry, but a majority of those are not local pilots. And what was interesting from that list were the local pilots that I do know that were not on that list.
Michael, 30 seconds.
Just on the safety and the Shale Bluffs question. So this was examined in great detail in front of the commissioners. I would encourage anyone listening or sitting here to watch the Alec Siebold presentation on safety. Went into great detail about Shale Bluffs, and it is not any less safe. And in fact, with the new runway and the new approach that it will require, it will be safer.
I would challenge you to name a safety issue at our airport and explain how the plan will resolve it. I've asked the county for such an analysis, and I can't provide one because it doesn't exist.
I agree. I'm not saying that the airport is unsafe, and nobody is. What I'm saying is that it can be made safer.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on. This question is for Tori. How do you see the local economy surviving with a downgraded or lessened capacity, operational capacity airport?
Well, first of all, the downgrade is not really on the table. That's not a possibility. Again, there's talk about what's called sterilization at the airport, which would greatly reduce the access, the numbers of planes, perhaps. As Amory said, that would be counter to kind of FAA goals. I don't think that this is not an economics question. We saw just last year-to-year date of growth, 14% more enplanements last year to this year. 14% growth. That's without any airport improvements. So our economy, extremely healthy and extremely strong. The airport that we have right now is appropriate for a little mountain town in the Rocky Mountains. Bigger planes flying in here like we are Grand Junction. We're not a hub. We need to have a little bit of respect for our environment, our community, and each other. It is not going to be negatively impactful to our economy. And we do need work done at the airport. And you know what? There are going to be impacts. The closure time for rebuilding the runway, 12 months, 18 months. It's estimated at, 8 months? With an overrun time schedule of 12 months. So it's possible. Are there going to be impacts? Either way. But is Aspen and our Roaring Fork Valley in economic dire? Not now. But if we do start allowing more access from bigger planes, we might just ruin exactly why we're all here. We might. Again, what we hear from complaints from our residents and our visitors, these only exacerbate some of those problems. None of it makes it any better.
Quick context on that. The state of the runway, due to subsurface water issues, it will need to be reconstructed at some point, whether or not an approved ALP goes through. Michael, did you have a rebuttal to that question?
I do think that there are aspects of the new airport that can improve quality of life. And I totally feel what Tori's saying, and I've done a lot of work trying to fix things. I was personally have been told by a high-ranking city staffer, a person who led to the short-term rental regulations happening in the Upper Valley, because I had 2 CU students do their master's thesis on the impacts of Airbnb in the Valley. And I advocated, despite working for Aspen Skiing Company for their reduction. So we routinely advocate for things that hit our bottom line, and I do that in my role all the time. Here's just one thing to consider. Currently, fewer than 5% of air travelers use public transportation to get to Aspen or Snowmass from the airport. This despite us having a highly utilized public transportation system and an incredibly transit-cultured visitor base. So we have people using public transit to get to the ski areas all the time. The new terminal can integrate mass transit into the new terminal. New buses can be brought online that allow for our luggage compatible. We could easily move that 5% number to 50%, and that alone would dramatically reduce traffic and improve quality of life in the Upper Valley.
Jackie, quickly.
Yeah, the Airport Advisory Board, we say this over and over again. Our vote was not about bigger planes. None of us want bigger planes. We, 5-2, voted to advance the airport layout plan because we want a better airport. It was not about bigger planes, and I just want to be very clear that it was a difficult and long and well thought out decision-making process for us to vote to move the airport layout plan forward, and it is because there's a lot of good things in there. We're talking about, twisting ourselves into knots to try and make something else happen, and the airport layout plan is a good plan that we voted to move forward, not because we want bigger planes.
Tori.
Thanks. 5% bus ridership out of the airport to 50% bus ridership out of the airport is an aspirational goal that I wish there could be some guarantee on and there could be some kind of plan on. But once again, there isn't. And that is a ground side improvement. We can have that without larger planes. That is one of those improvements that we will be doing regardless.
Final thoughts, and then we're going to go to closing remarks. Go ahead, Michael.
Except that you do need FAA money to pay for it because you need to be able to get more than that $100 million bonding amount. And just something Tori said before, talking about all of the environmental greenhouse gas improvements being on the terminal side. 93 to 97% I've heard of greenhouse gas emissions at the airport come from the planes. So that's where you've got to pursue your greenhouse gas reduction. Anywhere else is just nibbling around the edges.
Okay, thank you all very much. We're going to enter closing comments now. You each will have 2 minutes. Amory, we are going to start with you.
The two groups favoring
Use your mic.
used to being mic'd. The two groups favoring and the three groups opposing airport expansion agree on practically the whole modernization agenda, except about bigger planes that the advocates don't like to talk about because they're unwanted. Aspen can lead in sustainability by modernizing without catering to bigger planes that we don't need and the airlines don't want. I'll agree that we need a new runway, a great new terminal, and transit integration, but none of those needs bigger planes. Not the Airbus the coalition wants, not the bigger double-size Airbus they don't mention, and not the bigger private planes, some far worse, some better, that could flood in if we rebuild to fit them. The future does not need wider wingspans nor a redesigned runway. Now, the BOCC is set to sign an FBO deal whose $879 million expected fees could more than finance all airport needs, less than half that, with no FAA grants. It would be paid for mainly by the private planes that cause most of the impacts. Regaining financial independence begins our escape from ratcheting of federal overregulation, enabling more crowding, noise, pollution, traffic, and housing scarcity, eroding our economic foundations and our quality of life. The FAA has threatened none of those awful penalties the county made up and has no evidence for. The airlines will not abandon one of their most profitable airports. The FAA is indeed powerful, but so is this community, as it showed in '95. If the people use their constitutional right to overrule the commissioner's airport choices, the FAA must respect that choice. Accepting its offer, they keep their grants, we keep our airport layout, would restore our community's freedom to chart its own development path. Why rebuild to enable vast passenger growth to cram in every person who might fit and risk losing our soul? Are we here in this blessed place to make it like everywhere else? Will we choose to be victims or stewards? And will we demand the truth and accuracy that are the lifeblood of democracy? Thank you.
Thank you, Amory. Jackie? Folks, if you could hold your applause until the end, please. Thank you.
So I don't have a prepared remarks speech, but I have a lot of respect for Amory and I have a lot of respect for Tori. I just disagree with them here. And I feel like, we've gone through a really long process here. And I think what Amory's talking about is kind of foolish thinking. I think it's reckless and irresponsible. And I think that we have a really good airport layout plan that we could move forward with and get millions and millions of dollars of funding for that we as taxpayers won't be on the hook for. And I feel like, all the things that are in the recommendations, which I have right here, if anybody wants to come look at them, are really great. I mean, I love the idea of having electric infrastructure. I love the idea of having solar everywhere. I love the idea of being able to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by having more efficient planes come into this airport. And, I think that the noise is a huge factor. The newer planes are also quieter. And I think that we just have a really, really great opportunity for us to make a beautiful airport and have, the community involved with this moving forward. And we have to have an airport layout plan in order to do that. So I just don't understand why these groups want to beat us up as a community over something that I don't see that much of an advantage in doing. I really think that widening the runway is not going to be some kind of dystopia, and I think we can move forward and really have a wonderful situation with a better airport, and that we can make that happen and come together as a community on this. And I just fundamentally don't see, what the advantage is to do it the other way. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori.
The airport expansion can be done without allowing the next class of larger aircraft and the negative impacts of that one piece of the expansion that we differ on. Greater quantity and size of aircraft allowed into this small mountain airport will incrementally degrade and define our valley growth, health, and quality of life. But these ballot questions are about your rights. These ballot questions are about voting, community voice, and your rights for an airport that benefits your life, valley, economics, and environment. We have a history of voting on this airport. Funding, layout, expansion, 4 times. We should be allowed to vote for the best direction for our valley. The interpretation of 1C that I have seen suggests that it seeks to suppress citizen and voter rights, violates the Pitkin County Home Rule Charter, Colorado, and U.S. constitutions. A word of respect for Jim Crown. His vision was as a community partner and steward. With his sad and untimely passing, now there is a new corporate bottom line goal. We have Aspen One, new Limelight hotels in New York and other locations, and I still support the Aspen Skiing Company, but it is more and more about profit, not people, about selling, not skiing, about commodity and not community. The top concerns of so many residents and visitors alike are affordability and livability, housing prices, housing availability and shortages, workforce shortages and commuter economies and loss of community, environment, capacity, quality, and the overuse, transportation, congestion, and delays. More larger planes do nothing to help, and instead, adding the next size up aircraft will incrementally destroy the quality of life and quality of experience in this valley. We need to work with the FAA for a new modern terminal and runway, but without the next level larger planes that will negate any positive progress that we have on the ground side at the airport. I suggest vote yes on 200 and no on 1C for your rights to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. Michael. Folks, please hold your applause.
So I do have to just take issue with what you said about the company I work for, because it's totally out of line, and it's just based on hearsay, and that's a ad hominem attack, and that is really, we've gotten all the way to this point without doing that, and that was, I work there, I know what it's like, I know what the goals are, and that was, please don't count this as my time, that was unfortunate. Here is the current situation.
I'll take a rebuttal on that. Thanks.
No. And our airport is failing. both the terminal and the runway. It has not been updated since the 1980s. FAA funding for airport has been cut off. We've spent more than $7 million this year for repairs the FAA would have paid for, and that number will only grow every year as we show the FAA, until we show the FAA we're committed to building an airport that meets their standards, which are all about safety. Because while the airport is not unsafe today, it can definitely be made safer. And the FAA is insisting that we create that safer airport now. A new runway and terminal will cost in excess of $300 million. The only financing model that works is one that accepts money from the FAA. Do not be fooled by arguments that we can pay for this for ourselves. We can't, but why would we want to anyway? It's like turning down a college scholarship for the college you most want to go to. And there's, I realize it looks like my time did count. So I'm going to skip to this, which is there is widespread support for supporting 1C and a no to question 200. It has been endorsed by the mayors of Snowmass, Basalt, Carbondale, and Glenwood Springs, all 5 Pitkin County commissioners. It has the backing of very respected environmentalists and the CEOs of RAFTA and the Aspen Valley Hospital. It is supported by many highly respected community members and former elected officials, including a former mayor of Aspen, John Bennett, who led the fight against the Aspen Airport expansion in 1995. There is a reason he's fighting for airport modernization today. And in a remarkable display of agreement in a political era when that seems impossible, a yes to ballot question 1C and a no to 200 has been endorsed by both the Pitkin County Democrats and the Pitkin County Republicans. This is an easy decision. Pitkin County deserves the best airport in the world, so let's go ahead and get it done.
Y'all can clap now. That's the end.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.
So the Aspen idea is live and well tonight. Thank you very much. Big thank you to our panelists. Could you just imagine for a moment, could I invite you to imagine if our national political stage mirrored what just happened this evening? Thank you all so much for your time, for your expertise, for your passion.